The weight of memory, or a ghost's embrace. The chill wasn't just in the air, it was pressed against my skin, a phantom weight that solidified the dread I'd carried since Maeve left. I remember the exact moment the floorboards creaked above, not with the familiar settling of an old house, but with the deliberate step of someone who shouldn't have been there. My breath hitched, a silent scream caught in my throat, knowing then that my solitude had been a terrible, terrifying lie. This occurred around 2 months after Maeve left for university, a stark line drawn across the familiar canvas of my life. Before then, the house had hummed with a different kind of quiet, a comforting presence of shared history and imminent return. But with her gone, a hollowed-out silence settled, vast and profound, stretching from her empty bedroom down to the kitchen where her coffee mug still sat on the drainer, a phantom limb of our shared routine. I was Elias, left with the echo of her laughter and the oppressive weight of unfamiliar quiet, trying to navigate the sudden, unnerving expanse of solitude that seemed to cling to every surface like dust. At first, the small shifts were negligible, easy to brush aside. A book I swore I'd left on the nightstand would later appear on the floor beside the bed. A set of keys I distinctly remembered placing by the door would reappear on the kitchen counter, seemingly transported by some invisible hand. My mind, a frantic librarian, scrambled for explanations, absent-mindedness, the settling of the old house, the sheer exhaustion from the grief that seemed to have taken root deep within me. I told myself it was the scent of her absence playing tricks, making me perceive patterns where there were none, manifesting her presence out of sheer longing. I sought comfort in the mundane, in the predictable rhythm of my solitary days, even as a growing knot of unease tightened in my gut. The house, once a sanctuary, began to feel like a witness, observing me with silent, unblinking judgment. Then came the chill, not the kind that slips in through a poorly sealed window, but a sudden, dense drop in temperature that would congeal in specific rooms, clinging to the air like something viscous. The living room, usually bathed in the warmth of the late afternoon sun, would inexplicably become an icebox, the fine hairs on my arms prickling as if a cold hand had brushed past. I'd walk into it, then out again, only for the sensation to vanish, leaving me doubting my own senses, wondering if the blood had simply run cold in my veins. But it wasn't a fleeting shiver. It was a pervasive cold, a static charge in the air that spoke of something alien, something that didn't belong. It was a weight pressing in, an invisible, intangible presence that seemed to absorb all warmth. The sounds began more subtly still, faint whispers, a sibilant rustle from Maeve's old room, too indistinct to make out words, but undeniably there, just beyond the reach of comprehension. I'd freeze, heart hammering against my ribs, straining to hear, only for the sound to dissolve into the silence, leaving only the ragged sound of my own breath. My rational mind worked overtime, attributing it to the wind, the creaks of an old house settling, the whispers of memory carried on currents of regret. But the frequency, the unnatural precision of these sounds chipped away at my resolve, leaving me hollowed out and weary. One evening, after a particularly long day of trying to ignore the creeping unease, I was making myself tea when I heard it. A distinct creak from the floorboard directly above my head, the very one that had always groaned under Maeve's weight when she'd sneak out late or tip-tap to the bathroom in the middle of the night. It wasn't a random house noise, not a branch scraping the window in the wind. It was the precise, deliberate sound of a footstep, heavy and intentional. I dropped the kettle, the clang echoing in a sudden deafening silence. My breath caught, held tight in my chest. Maeve was hundreds of miles away, absorbed in her new life. There was no one else in the house. My logical mind, ever the desperate advocate, tried to invent a scenario. An animal, the settling foundation, residual memory playing an auditory trick. But the clarity of that single creak, the specific weight it implied, felt too real, too intentional. It wasn't the distant echo of a past event. It was a present intrusion. The quiet was no longer simply hollow. It was watchful, breathing, waiting. The house wasn't empty. It was occupied by something I couldn't see, something that used Maeve's memory as its veil, its disguise. The chilling realization that I was not alone, that the source of the disquiet was external and intelligent, ignited a cold terror. It was a visceral understanding that the comforting cloak of grief had begun to fray, revealing something far more sinister beneath, something that knew my sister's movements, her very habits. This insidious mimicry of Maeve's actions, the way her perfume would sometimes waft from her closed door, only to vanish when I approached. The faint, almost imperceptible hum of a tune she used to sing, carried on a non-existent breeze. It wasn't just haunting, it was an unnerving foreshadowing. It suggested a depth of invasion, a parasitic intimacy that went beyond simple spectral presence, twisting my solitude into something truly monstrous. The house, once merely quiet, became a living, malevolent entity, its silence now a heavy shroud. Days blurred into a haze of heightened senses and gnawing fear. The cold spots intensified, no longer localized but spreading like an invisible disease, chilling entire rooms to the bone, even when the heating was on full blast. They would linger, pressing against me, a palpable weight in the air that stole my breath. Then came the glimpses, flickers in my peripheral vision, a shadow darting just outside the kitchen door, a fleeting shape by the stairs that dissolved into the empty wall when I snapped my head around. Each vanished before I could truly register it, leaving behind only the frantic thrumming of my heart and the desperate hope that it had been nothing at all. I stopped inviting friends over. Their casual chatter, their oblivious laughter, felt like an insult to the suffocating dread that had become my constant companion. Elias, once social, now isolated, found himself consumed by the terrifying certainty that Maeve's absence had not merely emptied the house, but had created a vacuum, now filled by something else entirely. It was a parasitic mimicry, feeding on the very fabric of our shared past. I'd hear it from her old room, a distinct low melody, hummed under breath, exactly as Maeve used to do when she was lost in thought, or a soft thud, like a book slipping from her hand onto the carpet. Each familiar sound, twisted by the profound malevolent chill it radiated, became a fresh wound, a cruel perversion of memory. This wasn't her, it was a hungry imitation, wearing her sounds like a skin. Then came the night. I was pulled from sleep, not by a sound, but by an overwhelming sensation of being held, not gently, like a dream or a memory might offer comfort, but with a possessive, cold pressure that crushed the air from my lungs. My limbs were heavy, pinned, the sheets tangled impossibly tight around me. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream. A suffocating weight pressed down, not a physical body, but a dense, chilling force, pervasive and absolute. It was a dread so profound it felt like I was drowning in ice, a presence that burrowed into my very core, demanding recognition, demanding everything. I thrashed, a silent, desperate struggle against an invisible, all-encompassing embrace that sought to consume me, to absorb my grief, my essence. When it finally receded, leaving me gasping,
Drenched in sweat and shaking uncontrollably, the room was steeped in a cold so acute it burned. That experience shattered the last vestiges of my rational reality. The house, Maeve's room, even my own reflection felt alien. I lived in a perpetual state of unease, every shadow a potential threat, every creak a reminder. I was haunted by a presence I could neither confirm nor deny, irrevocably trapped between the unbearable weight of memory and a dreadful, unending embrace that had for one terrifying night become horribly, physically real. Elias's descent into that waking nightmare reminds us how easily grief can unravel the fabric of what we believe to be real. The phantom weight he carried, the dread that solidified into a dreadful embrace, transformed his solitude into the most terrifying of lies. It makes one truly question how much of our own pain we invite, unknowingly, into the spaces we leave vacant, and what precisely fills that void. This story, a chilling exploration of memory's treacherous grip, is precisely the kind of unsettling narrative we bring you here on Content Channel. Tell us, if you were Elias, facing a presence that weaponized your deepest affections, would you fight to sever the connection or cling to the twisted echo of what was? Thank you for joining us on this journey into the unsettling depths of human experience. We'll be here again soon. Next, we journey to an isolated island where the tide brings in more than just flotsam, carrying whispers from the sunken wreck of a forgotten past.